Well, we made it to the top 5 of our prospect rankings, which includes some guys who could have a major impact in 2025 at the big league level, and also some who could be traded before the season even begins. We'll discuss all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves. And if you are on Instagram, follow us there as well at Locked On Braves. Trying to do some fun things over there as well. Send me any questions that you have. Going to respond to those in a reel on Instagram as I get used to that. So please make sure if you're on Instagram, go follow us over there at Locked On Braves to get that going. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On today's episode, we're going to talk about my top 5 prospects for the Atlanta Braves. Really looking forward to this discussion. Going to go in depth on the top 3 because I think there's a pretty firm top 3 in the Braves system right now that we should be really, really excited about. But we're going to go top 5 overall, and I'm going to tell you which one of these players might be traded before opening day. So a lot to get to on today's podcast. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, we are into the final episode here of our prospect rankings. I only do a top 10 on here, but also have some honorable mentions. Let's recap those really quickly. So those who just missed the top 10 are Giancarlo Lara, Nacho Alvarez, Drew Hackenberg, Lucas Braun, Didier Fuentes, Blake Burkhalter, and Herrick Hernandez, guys that are just outside of my top 10. I should also stop and remind you that the way that I do my prospect rankings are strictly based on upside. If this player reaches their max potential, how good could they really be? So that's why you may see some differences in my rankings compared to some others out there. But Lara, Nacho, Hackenberg, Braun, Fuentes, Burkhalter, and Hernandez, guys, just outside of my top 10. Now, guys, 6 through 10 on my list, I had Garrett Ballman at 10, followed by Luis Guanipa, Jose Perdomo, Diego Torrens, and Owen Murphy. A really solid group as well, hoping that some of those international signings like Perdomo and Guanipa, especially that have already been in the system for at least a year, really hoping we see those guys kind of take off this upcoming season because the Braves could use some of those bats to really shine and become a big part of the system. But now we move into the top 5. And as I said earlier, I think there is a definitive top 3. And after that, really the rest of the top 10, I think, is up for debate. But at number 5, I am putting newly drafted Cam Caminiti, 18-year-old left-handed pitcher the Braves took 24th overall in last year's draft, signed for full slot value of $3.56 million, considered to be one of the top prep arms, if not the top prep arm in last year's draft. He reclassified, so he drafted a 17-year-old, so really young for the class as well. Now, as I talked about when I did the spotlight on him, not a lot to go on, just 3 innings pitched at the major league, at the professional level last year. 3 innings, 3 hits, no walks, 1 earned, 4 strikeouts. And I mentioned in that, got a pitch clock violation, led to a wild pitch. So still kind of learning the new rules as well. So not a ton to take away from that. And was mostly fastball slider, but he obviously has some other pitches that he will mix in there. The fastball was more 94, 95 in the first inning. I saw some 96s in that, but really was sitting, low to mid 90s. To me, this is similar to J.R. Ritchie and Owen Murphy. And guys that the Braves took in high school, but they're guys that you can see a pretty safe floor with. And guys that are maybe already a little bit advanced for their age. And I think that's where Cam Caminiti lands. And you saw Owen Murphy, I have ranked 6th. You're going to see J.R. Ritchie in here as well. So those are 2 guys that I think very highly of. And for the Braves to take a high school arm like that, it seems like the pattern for them now is, at least in that draft and with taking Caminiti, is they're going to take high schoolers if they feel like there's a very safe floor. And I've always said that was the case with Murphy and Ritchie, and I feel like that's the same with Cam Caminiti. Now, certainly when you take a high school guy, you're dreaming on what they could become. If he adds some more velo, if he can improve on his secondaries, that you hope that there's a little bit more with a Cam Caminiti, just like with J.R. Ritchie and Owen Murphy. But I think it's a pretty safe floor for Cam Caminiti to be a, number 4, number 5 type of starter. I think he could very easily be that. And I think depending on how quickly they want to push him, I'm not saying in the next year or two, but I think he could move up pretty quickly because the command already looks like it's there. The slider looks good as well. But he is young. In order for him to reach even higher ceiling than that, to maybe be a number 3 or perhaps a number 2 type of starter, I need to see the velocity tick up a little bit, and perhaps that will happen. Again, a young arm, room to grow into that. And the command of it is a little bit at the top of the zone. He throws strikes with it. Right now, it's more control over command, but I'd love to see him stick that fastball at the top of the zone a little bit more. And I need to see the changeup continue to develop. If he can do those things, then perhaps you are looking at a number 3 with maybe a little bit more number 2 upside. But right now I look at him and projecting, I could project him as a mid-rotation type of starter with a safe floor as a 4th or 5th starter. So that's why I put Cam Caminiti at number 5 on my list. Now, number 4 on my list is J.R. Ritchie, who I've already talked about here once. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a couple of years now, you know how much I love J.R. Ritchie. In 2023, he was having the breakout year. The velocity ticked up. He looked incredible that season. Just again, looked like a top of the rotation type of guy, but then he got injured and he missed the rest of 2023, missed the first half of 2024. Coming back last year, the numbers are really good. A 2.90 ERA, a 1.13 whip, 49 2/3 innings, 56 strikeouts across 12 games, 11 starts. So the numbers look fantastic for him. But I didn't see that velocity tick back up to where it was in 2023 is the only reason I hesitate a little bit. But we have seen it for him. And I talked about this when I discussed Owen Murphy, because I think these two are always going to be grouped together a little bit because they were drafted together as high schoolers. But with Owen Murphy, yeah, we saw the breakout for him at the beginning of 2024, but I didn't really see anything different than what I saw the year before in Owen Murphy. For J.R. Ritchie, you saw significant changes from 22 to 23, mainly in the velocity, but that didn't come back after returning from Tommy John surgery. And perhaps it's just going to take him a little bit. But, right now it's a fastball that sits 92, 94. Yeah, it can get up to 96. But like I said, but in 2024, we were seeing that sit more mid-90s. And if you can get back to that, then I think there's legitimate number 2 upside for J.R. Ritchie. But as I said earlier with Caminiti and with Murphy, I think the floor is safe for Ritchie too. I could see him the floor being a number 4, number 5 starter rather easily, and maybe even sitting at a number 3, because the slider, the curveball, again, it's kind of hard to tell for me the difference between those two pitches on some of the camera angles you get at the minor league level, but very good movement on those pitches. So I really like J.R. Ritchie. I still think, the stuff looks good. Even in 2024, coming back, like I said, he had good numbers. I'm certainly not trying to, I got him at number 4 overall. So I obviously still like J.R. Ritchie, but I'm excited and hopeful to see him fully healthy in 2025. What does that look like? He's still just 21, turns 22 in the month of June. I would think they'd start him back at high A with the potential of getting to double A by mid-season. And, when you're in double A in the Braves system, you're just a call away from getting an opportunity. But I think it's a big year for J.R. Ritchie. And can that velocity tick back up like we saw before he got injured and had Tommy John? And is there another level for him? Again, where he is right now, he is a safe bet to be a back-end starter, perhaps even a number 3 starter. But if he can get that velocity back up, and again, I do my rankings based on potential upside, and we've seen it from J.R. Ritchie before, I think he's got a chance to be a number 2 starter and be really, really good. So I'm excited about J.R. Ritchie. I like him a lot. I have for a while now. I cannot wait to see him back healthy in 2025, what he could be like, hopefully getting back to that pre-injury status with some of the velo and his stuff just ticked up a little bit. So Again, I love J.R. Ritchie. I understand some people are down on him. Some people have him in the back half of their top 10, but most have him at least in their top 10. But I'm a little bit higher on him, I think, than the consensus out there, putting him at number 4, which is another tier behind the top 3 in the system. And I do think there is a distinctive top 3 in the Braves system right now. And in fact, I was going back and forth on how to order these top 3 just an hour before getting on here to record. But I think they're all really close. However, I did make a change at the top. We'll get into that change, and I'll tell you my top 3 here next. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, well, that's just the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Also, please make sure that you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Don't end up like Pat Hoberg. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen, solely catching up with everything happening around Major League Baseball. All right, let's get into the top 5, or the top 3, rather. We started with the top 5 today, looking at Cam Caminiti at 5 and J.R. Ritchie at number 4. So coming in at number 3 for me, and this is a change from what I had last year. It's a change from what I had just a couple of hours ago. At number 3 is Hurston Waldrep. And last year I had him number 1 overall. Like I said, just a couple of hours before recording this, I had him as number 1 overall again because, and I'm going to get into a comparison of Waldrop and AJ Smith-Shawver here in a minute, kind of digging into the data a little bit, and I'll explain why I made this change. But for me, really nothing was solved in 2024 for either Waldrop or AJ Smith-Shawver. The questions that I had on both of those guys going into 2024 remain this season. Can we get better control from both of these guys? Can Hurston Waldrop throw that splitter for strikes? Can AJ Smith-Shawver hold the velocity deep into games? Those questions still remain for me with both of those guys. I don't think any of those questions got answered in 2024, which is unfortunate. But I still believe in the potential of both of them to be top of the rotation arms. I really do. But as for Hurston Waldrop, it's, he got his big league debut, and you can question whether or not that was warranted, should have happened, but you did get his big league debut. But it's a fastball that sits in the mid 90s, can get 97, 98. But the calling card for Hurston Waldrop has always been that splitter. And it's been good. Even in his very brief stint at the major league level, the splitter got a lot of swings and misses. And it got a lot of swings and misses at the minor league level. But that's really all that he has right now. The fastball is just not good. And as I said, going into last year, I need to see him throw that splitter for strikes more often. Otherwise, good hitters at the upper levels are just going to spit on it and sit on that fastball. And that seems to be what is happening. They still can't hit that splitter. It's still a tough pitch for hitters, but they're just waiting on that fastball, and they're crushing it. It doesn't have good metrics behind it. And again, I'll point that out here in a minute when I do the comparison. But I still think there is a lot of potential here for Hurston Waldrop. It's just, for me, again, I was ecstatic to see the Braves get him in a draft. Being somebody who covers the college game very closely, watching the path of Hurston Waldrop and dreaming on what he could be. But it's like I've still been dreaming on that guy, for 3 or 4 years now, since watching him at the college ranks, and he just has not been able to make those changes in control. And the fastball just still is not good enough to get out big league hitters, even at, the upper velocity. So right now, he's essentially a one-pitch pitcher with the splitter. And that's not really what we were sold on or what we dreamt on when he was drafted. We dreamt about a guy who can sit mid-90s, throw upper 90s, which he can do. A guy with a plus splitter, which he still has, but there's nothing else off of that. The slider has not become a very good pitch for him. He needs a fourth pitch that he can throw in there. So we just have not seen him advance the way that I would have liked to. Now, he did get injured after his brief MLB stint that he had, missed some time, obviously set him back there, but he just has not made the strides that I was hoping to see, at least in 2024, where I was hoping to see big strides. You know, the talk for me a lot going into 2024 was who of AJ Smith-Shawver or Hurston Waldrep steps up and becomes a rotation mainstay by the end of the season. Well, it was neither one of them. Instead, it was Spencer Schwellenbach, who I think I had ranked third, just behind these guys last year. But neither one of them did. And like I said, those questions still remain for both of them. But I have, again, after not seeing much progression for Waldrop, who is an older guy who has, you know, the college experience to lean on, and we still haven't seen the growth from him yet, I'm starting to waver a little bit on him. Now, look, the floor for Hurston Waldrop is a closer. I mean, with that fastball splitter combination, he can still come in and be a very good, you know, reliever, potential closer. So the floor, the ceiling is still very high for him. And I've said this from the jump, and that's why I still rank him very high, because I think the possible outcomes for Waldrop are either, you know, he figures out some of the secondaries, he figures out how to utilize that fastball and command it at the top of the zone, he figures out how to throw that splitter more for strikes, and you're talking about a top of the rotation type of arm. You know, it's either that or he becomes a dominant reliever closer type of pitcher. Those are the likely outcomes for Hurston Waldrop. It's either a top of the rotation starter or a dominant setup closer type of reliever. And so that's why I still am very high on him, but I am starting to pull back a little bit just because I didn't see that growth from him in 2024 that I wanted to see. Now, coming in at number 2 on this list, one of the changes that I made here is I put Drake Baldwin 2 overall. I had him 3rd originally, but I bumped him up after I moved Waldrop down. And if, again, you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know I like Drake Baldwin, but I do have questions about his swing once he gets to the higher levels and pitchers that are able to bust him inside. Because that swing, it feels to me or looks to me like, and I'm not a swing expert by any means, it looks to me like there's a hole on the inner half that you can get to Drake Baldwin. And even in some of the watches of him that I've gone back and done, pitchers who were able to get in on him, you know, were able to jam him and get him out. So I do worry about that still with his swing, but you know, if that's the one hole that he has, there's not too many pitchers that can pitch inside like that. I think he's going to be okay. I think the question for me is he a 240 hitter or is he a 260 hitter? I think the power is for real. And I think the on-base ability is for real. Assuming that he's becomes a full-time catcher, or let's say he's a catcher in DH, I think there's 20, 25 home run potential in there for Drake Baldwin and a guy that's going to get on 33 to 34% of the time. I think that is the case for Baldwin, which if he does that as a catcher, I mean, that's top 10 catcher level of production in baseball. If you can do that, I worry about the hit tool a little bit. What is the average going to be like? Which most catchers aren't going to hit 260 or higher for you. So even if he's in between 240, 260, that's okay. As long as he's getting on base, hitting a bunch of home runs for you. That's what we hope Sean Murphy is. That's what I think Sean Murphy is going to be. And from all the talk, it sounds like he has made some strides behind the plate as well and could potentially stick at catcher. Now, reasons to believe in Drake Baldwin, and one of the reasons that I moved him up in the 2 spot here, 81% contact rate with an end zone contact rate of over 85% at AAA last year. So like I said, good contact rates, and he chased balls just 23% of the time. So that's a good chase rate as well. That's a profile for somebody that has good plate discipline, is going to make contact and not going to strike out too much. Average exit velocity of 92.7 miles per hour and a max exit velocity of 111.9. Granted, these are different levels, but comparing this to Sean Murphy's 2023, where he had an average exit velocity of 91.5, so that's 1 mile per hour at less, and he had a max exit velocity of 114.7, so that's about 3 miles per hour harder. We know Sean Murphy can absolutely crush the ball when he actually hits it. However, the 8% barrel rate for Drake Baldwin at AAA is a little lower than I'd like for a guy whose profile is power, but he does make a little bit more contact than your average power guy. You look at Sean Murphy's barrel rate in 2023, which is just insane, 16%. I'm not expecting that. I'm not expecting that from Murphy again. That's just an insane barrel rate, but I would expect it to be more over 10%. Usually that's kind of the cutoff that I look for with, elite type of power is a 10% or higher barrel rate. So the 8% barrel rate does give me a little bit of pause. And the 52.2% hard hit rate, though, is really good. Sean Murphy's hard hit rate in 2023 was just 45.8%, which isn't bad. But it just shows you he's making consistent hard contact, just not getting it on the barrel quite as much. 49.1% ground ball rate. Again, would love to see that come up a little bit. I talked a lot about Sean Murphy last year and his high ground ball rate going up 10% from the previous year from his career average. I think a lot of that had to do with injury, but still for ground ball rate, I'd rather see that around 45% for somebody who is looking to have, some big power. But I do like Drake Baldwin. I think the profile fits well for him to succeed at the next level, a 240, 260 type of hitter with 20 to 25 home run potential, and a guy that's also going to take his walks and get on base at a 33, 34% clip. So I am very high on Drake Baldwin, even with some of the swing concerns that I've had in the past. But I do think the power is legitimate. I think the plate discipline is legitimate, and that's going to help him become a big league hitter. Now the question is just, what do you do with him? And where does he go? How do you play him? How do you insert him in? Because Sean Murphy, still seems to be the guy. And I think Sean Murphy is the guy. They don't seem willing to trade Drake Baldwin if they weren't going to include him in a deal for Crochet. So is it a situation? I would assume that Drake Baldwin is not going to be on the major league roster to begin the year. If he is by midseason, does it become a bit of a share with Sean Murphy? I've talked about that in the past. I don't love that for Sean Murphy. I think it's a guy that needs to be out there, 5 times a week. I think that needs to be the workload for Sean Murphy. So does it become another situation like we had with d'Arnaud where he's having to split times and play every other game? I don't love that for a player either. Next year, if Ozuna is gone, do you work Drake Baldwin in that way? Get him in the DH spot. So I don't know. That stuff seems to work itself out. But the player as is, the player that Drake Baldwin is, I think he's going to have an impact at the big league level. I think the profile that he has, the contact rates that he has, the plate discipline that he has, the power that he has is going to make him a big league contributor in some way. Just don't know what that's going to look like yet with the Atlanta Braves. All right, at this point, you probably already figured out who number one on my list is. Again, I just made this change not long ago, and I'm very excited about the season for AJ Smith-Shawver. I'll talk more about him here next. So coming in at number one on this year's top 10 prospect list is AJ Smith-Shawver. And this is a bit of a change for me. I've always liked AJ Smith-Shawver, and I think the ceiling's always been there for him. I had him ranked second last year behind Hurston Waldrep. But looking into the data a little bit more, I'm even more excited for AJ Smith-Shawver, who, by the way, wasn't bad when he came up this year and then got injured, unfortunately, kind of like Hurston Waldrop and kind of like every other Braves player last year. And he's had some moments at the big league level. Now, the postseason game didn't go so well, but I even talked about that. There were some things in that game that just kind of snowballed on him and got away from him, that he really couldn't do too much about. He did only pitch in one game at the big league level this past year before getting injured. 4 1/3 innings, 3 hits, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. And that's the one concern, or not the one concern. There's still a couple of concerns that I have for AJ Smith-Shawver, but one of them is being able to work deep into games, just something we haven't seen him do on a consistent basis, and something I want to see him get better at, working deep into games, but also holding that velocity deep into games. We've seen him come into ball games before pumping 97, 98, and then it just slowly ticks off to the point where we're working 93, 94 in the outing. How can he control that so that he's working more 94, 95 and then pumping in 97, 98 when he needs to throughout the outing? And that's what was so weird about his postseason start as well. If you remember early in that outing, he was 92, 93, 94. And then finally, as the outing went on, it's like it took him a while to warm up for that postseason game, which you would think he'd come out, intensity on fire, throwing really hard. And that's generally what we see for AJ Smith-Shawver starts. We see him coming out throwing really hard and then it kind of tapering off. And it was the opposite in that postseason outing. But either way, those are still the questions that I have for AJ Smith-Shawver. Can he control his pitches enough? Because it's all good stuff. The fastball, the changeup's become a really good, I think it's become his best secondary, his best, off-speed pitch, certainly. The slider, the curveball. Can he control them enough to be a top of the rotation arm? Because like I said, I think all those pitches are good, but can he control them enough and throw them for strikes enough to be able to keep hitters off balance for 5-6 innings? Can he work deep into games? Can he hold the velocity deep into games? Those are the questions left for AJ Smith-Shawver. If he solves those questions, you're looking at a number 2 starter, and maybe even more than that. Again, it's a kid that still is really, really young at 22 years old. So again, I'm very excited about AJ Smith-Shawver, but these numbers that I'm about to give you here in a second are reasons why I'm even more excited about AJ Smith-Shawver. And here's the interesting thing too, because the Braves brought him up so early, he only has one minor league option left. So the Braves use that this year. He's going to go into next season without any minor league options. So this is the year, really, I think it's the year for both AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrep. You got to figure out, what is the plan with these two guys going forward? Is Waldrop, are you going to continue to develop him as a starter, or is it time to make that move to the bullpen? For AJ Smith-Shawver, look, I think he could go to a bullpen role, but I think the reason I have him ranked 1 is because I think there's more of a likelihood that he can be a starter long-term. Again, with Waldrop, like I said, the likely outcomes for him are he's either a top of the rotation starter or he's a dynamite reliever. For AJ Smith-Shawver, he might not be a top of the rotation starter, but I could see him falling back and being a number 3, number 4 type starter. And that's okay. Again, I could see him being a good reliever as well, but I could see the fallback for AJ Smith-Shawver just being a really good number 3 to number 4. Sometimes he has it, sometimes he doesn't, type of pitcher that maybe is a little bit up and down. But if he puts it all together, I think you're still looking at a top of the rotation guy. Now let's do the comparison, because I looked at some of the data for both AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrop, and this is part of why I boosted AJ Smith-Shawver up to the top and moved Waldrop down. I wanted to take a look at, and these are AAA, this is AAA data that we have on these guys. I want to take a look at their 2 best pitches. So I'm comparing their fastball and then comparing the changeup and splitter for the 2 guys. The average fastball velocity, AJ Smith-Shawver 95, Hurston Waldrop 94.2. So pretty similar there, but you look at max fastball velocity, AJ Smith-Shawver 100, Waldrop 97.7. So you see AJ Smith-Shawver can get it up a little bit higher at times. Now, here's where the big discrepancies come between the fastball of these 2 guys and why I ultimately put AJ Smith-Shawver at the top. Fastball strike percentage. So percentage of the time that you can throw your fastball or get a strike with your fastball, 68.8% for AJ Smith-Shawver. That's pretty solid. 61.7% for Hurston Waldrop. It's not good. Fastball zone percentage, the amount of time you can throw the fastball in the zone, 51.5% for AJ Smith-Shawver. Not bad. 44.3% for Hurston Waldrop. That's pretty bad. Fastball swinging strike percentage. So the number of swinging strikes that you get on your fastball, 12.2% for AJ Smith-Shawver. That's really good. 5.5% for Hurston Waldrop. That's really bad. Fastball called strike and swinging strike percentage, 31.7% for AJ Smith-Shawver, 23.8% for Hurston Waldrop. And here's the final one I'm going to give you on the fastball. You hear a lot of people talk about induced vertical break, IVB, these days. And I think here's a pretty good example of why it's important. The induced vertical break on AJ Smith-Shawver's fastball, 17.6%. 18 or higher is considered good. So he's kind of just on that bubble of having good induced vertical break. Hurston Waldrop, 13.9. Again, not good. You compare the 2 fastballs for these guys, and AJ Smith-Shawver's is clearly better, clearly the better pitch. And I think you've seen that in some of the results for Hurston Waldrop. Like I said earlier, guys are just spitting on that splitter, sitting on that fastball, and it's not a good fastball. Even at that velocity of sitting 94, 95, 96, it's just not a good fastball. Now you look at the changeup and the splitter for these 2 guys. The whip percentage for the changeup for AJ Smith-Shawver, 43.4%. For the splitter for Waldrop, 48%. So that's why you still see the upside with Waldrop, because that splitter is so good. Now the chase percentage, 32.5% for Smith-Shawver's changeup, 37.7% for Waldrop's splitter. So again, he's getting a lot of chase with that splitter. Called strike plus whiff percentage, 29.3% on AJ Smith-Shawver's changeup, 31.1% on his splitter. The zone percentage, 33.4% for AJ Smith-Shawver's changeup, 30.3% for Waldrop's splitter. And again, you don't want to really be throwing your secondaries in the zone if you don't have to. You want to get chase on those. But I've talked about with Waldrop, because guys are just spitting on that splitter and sitting fastball, he's got to be able to throw it in the zone a little bit more. And it's still such a good pitch. He can risk doing that. So you can see the fastball is clearly better from AJ Smith-Shawver. The splitter is better than AJ Smith-Shawver's changeup, but here is the difference with AJ Smith-Shawver. He still has the slider, which rates much better than Hurston Waldrop's slider, and he has the curveball to go along with it. So again, once you look at the data from both of these two pitchers, I think you can see that AJ Smith-Shawver is pretty clearly ahead of Hurston Waldrop. Again, the ceiling I think is still very high for Waldrop because that splitter is still very, very good, but AJ Smith-Shawver just has the more complete package to be a starter, and that's why I put him at the top. So which of these guys is most likely traded? I talked about Drake Baldwin, how they wouldn't include him in the Crochet deal. So when are you going to trade him? Sounds like they're not going to. He's untouchable. I think if you're going to trade anybody out of this group, and I think it's obvious after I went through this, Waldrop is the guy to trade. Again, I think he still has a very high ceiling, but he's also the riskiest of this top three. So if you're going to make a big move for Dylan Cease, which it sounds like the asking price for him is absurdly high at the moment, or Michael King, or make any other big move this offseason, and you got to give up one of your top three, I think Waldrop is the one to give up because he's just the riskiest of the group. Again, even though I think the ceiling is high for him, I think he is the riskiest. All right, let's get into the news a little bit. Also, let me know what you think about the top 5 prospects there. But I want to get into some of the news because the Tigers did sign Jack Flaherty to a 2-year, $35 million deal with an opt-out after 2025. He'll make $25 million in 2025. That's a big deal. I know the AAV is still going to be $17.5 million. But I imagine the Braves, who have been moving around money because they want to keep that team payroll down in 2025, they probably would have said no way to getting that money. And the reason that he's willing to do that is because he's probably going to opt out after the season. So get that money up front, and he's likely going to opt out. The option year is basically, or it's not an option year, but the second year is just insurance for Flaherty in case he gets hurt. And I think the Tigers can also offer him a qualifying offer because he didn't get one from the Dodgers, because you can't get one if you were traded during the season. So a good deal there for the Tigers, who are also in on Bregman. And it's fun to see other teams involved with big free agents out there other than the Dodgers. And then the Tigers traded Alex Faedo to the Rays. I talked about Faedo last week after they DFA'd him. I think it's a very interesting arm. It's got some upside, so we'll see what the Rays are able to do with him. I mentioned briefly the asking price on Dylan Cease seems to be a little bit unrealistic, so I'd imagine the Braves are out on their current asking price. Carlos Carrasco signed a minor league deal with the Yankees, chance to make $2.5 million. Colby Allard still pitching. He signs a minor league deal with the Guardians. And Pat Hoberg was fired as he was found out to be sharing a sports betting account with a professional poker player who also bet on baseball. No evidence that Hoberg bet on any games or manipulated any games that he worked with. In fact, I think if you look at umpire's scorecard, he was one of the better guys behind the plate. He also deleted some messages, though, that were central to MLB's investigation. So that's unfortunate. Gambling can be very, very addictive and scary out there. I know they're one of our sponsors, but if that is you, again, make sure you're getting the help that you need. You got a guy whose livelihood, the only thing you cannot do is don't be involved in gambling in any way, and he still couldn't resist. So it's very powerful. I don't have to say drugs, probably a strong word for it, but be very careful if you cannot access any amount of control with gambling. So unfortunate for Pat Hoberg, unfortunate for Major League Baseball, because it's a black eye on the sport. All right, that will do it for this episode. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of my top 5 prospects. This question from Sam. Hey, Jake, is Ian Anderson still the Braves' rotation plans? Also, don't the Braves have a shortstop international prospect in the works? Might that be why they're going with Arcia till he's ready? In an international shortstop prospect they have, whether it be even Tavares, Embriores Tavares, or Jose Perdomo, it's going to be years before those guys are ready. They did sign an older international prospect this past this past signing period on January 15th, but even that, at least be a couple of years before he was ready. Ian Anderson, Grant Holmes, it sounds like they're going to battle it out for the fifth starter spot. Both of them might be in the rotation to start the year. We'll see, but they're both out of options, and one of them could go to the bullpen if they're not in the rotation. All right, that will do for this episode of Locked On Braves. Again, if you're on Instagram, please go give us a follow at Locked On Braves. Send me a question over there as well. I'm wanting to answer a question a day over there, so submit those on Instagram to be answered. Follow me there as well. And if you're on YouTube and you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. Follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.